So thank you everyone again for joining us for this public informational meeting. We're going to cover a lot of different streets at tonight's meeting. Thank you all for joining us. So I'm Alex Ellis. I'm a principal planner with the city's Department of Planning and Development. I'm also joined by my colleagues at the department, Martina Haggerty and Alexis Gibning, who will be helping moderate this a little bit. So let's get started. So we're going to talk about a couple things tonight. First of all, which streets we're looking at for improvements this fall, how they fit with the citywide urban trail network, what the changes are, and at the end we'll have a Q&A question and answer section. So we've all done lots of virtual meetings. The way we're doing it for this one is any questions or comments you have, there's the Q&A function in Zoom, which is at the bottom of your screen. Throughout the meeting, feel free to enter questions into there. We will do our best to answer those at the end of the meeting, as well as summarize those questions and answers and post them to the city's website after the meeting. So again, we'll read your question and answer after the presentation. If you'd rather talk, that's fine. You can use the raise hand feature, and during the question and answer part of the meeting, we will allow you to talk, and you can say your piece, and we'll respond as we can. Two things about that raise hand feature. One, if you're on a phone, I don't know if anyone is, but *9 on the phone interface is the same as the raise hand feature. Finally, if and when we do call on you during the question and answer period to talk, this is the first thing you do. Just state your first name and last name and the street where you live. Doesn't have to be in Providence. We just want to get that identification out there up front, just to prevent any derailings of the meeting. So I apologize if you hear sirens or motorcycles going by my house, but I live on a busy street. All right, so let's jump in. So this map on the screen here are neighborhood greenways that are planned for 2020 and 2021. There's the yellow lines. Each of the names of those streets is called out there. We'll get a little bit more into what that means in a second. So we're looking at largely South Side, Washington Park, West End, Federal Hill, Olneyville are really the neighborhoods that we're looking at for work in this season. So how does that fit into the broader network? So again, this is the same yellow lines here in this map, but with the addition of these additional lines. So the other lines in here are the rest of the planned urban trail network. Some of those are built already. The ones that already exist are in green here. So you can see there's some connections already between the green ones and the yellow ones, like Lockwood and Pine Street there in Upper South Providence, and in Olneyville. There are other segments, the orange and the gray, that are additional planned segments of the urban trail network. So some of those are neighborhood greenways like the yellow lines, just further out. Some of them are planned for sooner, maybe even 2021. But they're different types of facilities. And then some of those gray ones are a mix of each of those. So some are neighborhood greenways, some are other things, and some of them are sooner, some of them are later. Actually, the gray ones are all further out than this season. Sorry, that was a little confusing, but the orange, so the yellow ones, the point of this slide is the yellow ones connect to a lot of other pieces of the planning work at various stages of planning. So moving along. So why did we choose these streets? We actually went through a whole process for prioritizing segments of the urban trail network for how soon they would happen. And the big factors we looked at were connectivity, access, and equity. So really big factor when a lot of people think about these urban trail segments is, does it connect to anything? So that was a big factor that we looked at. So thinking not only does it connect to something right now, but does it connect to something when we're expecting it to be built or sooner after? Access, looking at all the various civic resources that we have, as well as jobs where people live, all these different cultural and business institutions across the city. Does the street serve, what's the mix of those that the street serves? Finally, equity. It's really important that we are investing in our neighborhoods equitably. Transportation planning in Rhode Island has made unhealthy decisions in the past and too often in the present that disproportionately impact communities of color. And it's important that as part of this government that recognizes that wrong, that we're working to actively overcome that and make different decisions. So why these streets? So when a lot of people picture, greenways, great streets, they picture something like this. This picture is from the demonstration day on Broad Street that we held about 2 years ago. A temporary installation of the kind of urban trail that we're planning on Broad Street. I'll note, actually, I'll go back 2 slides. Broad Street is orange here, and it actually connects a lot of these streets we're talking about tonight. And Broad Street is planning to be repaved and restriped in 2021. So that's this project that 2 years ago we were showing people what it might look like approximately. But this is an example of a protected urban trail. So it's got these barricades in between the green lanes that are sort of bike lane type things on the road, but separated. So that's the key here. And this sort of urban trail, this two-way protected, is really designed for busy roads, major arterials with higher speeds and volumes of cars. So this isn't what we're talking about for neighborhood greenways. It is something that you may have seen previously and you may see again. Neighborhood greenways are also not the same as off-road trails. And I saw our friends that Winnebago Sackett River Watershed Council are on the meeting. They'll recognize this picture. It's just so kind of hard to use it. So I think this is Riverside Park, but there's other off-road trails, shared use paths throughout the city that you're very familiar with. East Bay Bike Path is another one nearby. And this is not what we're talking about either. So these are both separated entirely from cars. But what we are talking about is a neighborhood greenway that creates a space that is a shared space that is safe for everyone as a shared space. So frankly, it's a pretty modest change to the streets that we're looking at. Focusing on some of these features, signage, striping, traffic calming, mostly residential streets. We'll get into a couple of these features in the next few slides. But the basic idea is to take a street that's already pretty low traffic and slow and really add features to make sure that people aren't speeding down the street, for example, so that you can feel safe having your kids cross the street, or you know, biking with someone who's not as experienced, without fear of someone trying to go 35 and honking at you, or other unsafe behavior. So let's get into these in a little bit more detail. So the biggest change on a lot of these streets are speed lumps. And speed lumps are a traffic calming measure that the city uses in a lot of places, not just neighborhood greenways. You're probably pretty familiar with them. The distinguishing feature of these is they've got the gap in between the little pillows. And the gaps there exist primarily so that emergency vehicles are able to continue to get down the street as quickly as they need to. The spacing of ambulance and fire truck wheels is different from that of personal automobiles, so that it slows down cars but allows the emergency vehicles to also slow down but go faster without damaging the vehicles. And the side bonus of those gaps is that if you're biking or on a scooter, for example, you can go between those as well. And they're really quite effective at slowing down traffic. We've studied before and after on some Providence streets where they've been installed, and they're both effective at reducing speeds and cost effective because they are good speed reduction for the amount we invest in them. So speed lumps are, again, something that the city installs both through neighborhood greenways and other means. Traffic calming is something that, one of the things that city council members and 311 hear about the most. Most people have stories of people driving too fast in their neighborhood. So, you know, these are installed all over the city, and this is another place where we're installing them for a similar purpose, but part of this program. Another feature that neighborhood greenways have is signage. So basically it's slowing people down through traffic calming and some other measures, and then really designating, making clear to folks that this is part of the network, that this street is designed as a neighborhood greenway, is intended as a neighborhood greenway. So this picture shows an example, I think it might be from Portland, Oregon, of the neighborhood greenway signage, 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. We're not gonna have speed limit signs like that as part of this project, but definitely the goal is to have people go slower, and there'll be some signage designating this as identifying it as such. This is another kind of signage, really. It's not a sign, but it's a marking on the roadway, these shared lane markings. And we like to put them on a green rectangle like this to really make them extra noticeable. And this really serves a similar purpose to the signage in the previous slide, identifying this as a neighborhood greenway and reminding people that folk on bikes could be here, belong here. Sharas are sometimes used historically have been used on streets where they're not really appropriate. They are good as sort of a supplementary measure on streets that are already slow. So they're not really appropriate for bigger roads. So we're trying to use them appropriately here. Another minor role of Sharas is that they're supposed to indicate where you're supposed to be in the lane if you're on a bike. So we're putting them in a place where that is applicable, but that's not the main purpose of them here. The main purpose is to say, this is a place where bikes can go. And, you know, we often talk about bikes when we're talking about these urban trails, but they are good for anyone who's traveling not in a car, be it on a bike, on a skateboard, on a scooter, on a stroller even, anything that rolls and goes at that sort of under 20-mile-per-hour speed. Or jogging, lots of modes are good for these streets. All right, so a couple of these streets have segments or the whole street that are one way. And on those streets, what we're proposing here are what's called contraflow bike lanes. So contraflow bike lanes, if you're not familiar with them, take a street that's one way and add the second direction of traffic, the opposite direction of traffic, for bikes. And again, we say bikes, but really anyone who fits that sort of physical characteristic can use them. So a couple examples will come up over the course of the maps that I'll walk through, and I'll mention those. Contraflow bike lanes are pretty widely accepted as a good design for these sorts of situations. But we don't have a lot of them in Providence yet. So these will probably be the first contraflow bike lanes in Providence, the ones that we're installing here. Actually, I'm thinking of examples of where we might have them. Clifford Street is sort of a contraflow bike lane because the vehicular traffic is one way. It's a little different because it's a two-way. I'm talking about contraflow bike lanes here. I'm talking about on sort of, if you're in the car going the way the cars go, to your left in the opposite direction, bikes are coming. If you're in the contraflow bike lane, the cars are to your left, as in this picture. All right, moving along. So the final feature that, that we're going to be including in these neighborhood greenways, not right now, but pretty soon, is wayfinding signage. We have started working on a project to put together a signage plan that is that serves our whole urban trail network throughout the city. Over the next several months, we'll be putting that together in more detail with a lot of community input. So stay tuned for that. Building off some of the success, really, that the Woonsocket River Watershed Council, the signage package that they put together and have started to implement, and some of the other brands such as City Walk that already exist and similar features throughout the city. So here's a list of streets we're talking about tonight. It's a big list. The map might be a little bit easier to process, but I'm just gonna walk through them one by one and highlight the various features that we just talked about that are present on each of these streets and where they are. So let's get started. So here's that map again. Again, South Side, West End, Federal Hill, Colneyville. Here's that map again. So again, this is how they connect to the broader network. All right. So let's start up near the high schools in Upper South Providence. So on Fricker Street, which is the street that goes between Classical and Central, or sorry, between Classical and Central and PCTA, Providence Career and Technical Academy. The street runs between Cranston Street and Broad Street, and it's pretty short. And it actually even has a gate that closes sometimes during school hours. But we're looking to make that a neighborhood greenway, put some speed bumps on it in a couple locations. Lockwood is across Broad from Fricker. It's one way towards Broad, so you wouldn't in a car go from Fricker onto Lockwood. But so that's one of the locations that we are planning to install a contraflow bike lane. In addition to that contraflow bike lane on Lockwood, between Pine and Broad, there are 3 locations where we are planning speed bumps on Lockwood. So 2 over there close to Broad, near the Burger King, near, I think Avenue Concept is over there, and Dare, and then 1 closer to Prairie Avenue. And again, so Pine Street and Friendship Street have relatively new existing bike lanes as part of City Walk. So that's a connection there. But this neighborhood greenway will go all the way between Prairie and Cranston Street. And then across Cranston Street, it picks up again. So here's where we just ended. Fricker Street's on the right here. That was on the left of the previous map. Across this busy intersection of Cranston and Westminster, we'll continue the neighborhood greenways. So Winter Street here, we're not planning any speed lumps on Winter Street. A little receiving bike lane at the intersection. Then we'll direct the neighborhood greenway along Washington and Knight. So 2 speed lamp locations on Washington, one near the back of the new Citizens Bank drive-through, another sort of in the middle of this block between Batty and Knight. On Knight, a couple locations for speed lumps, 2 sort of between Carpenter and Broadway, which is the street up here in the upper left. And continuing on Knight on the next slide here, so the right-hand side here is the upper left of the previous map. So north of Broadway, Knight Street is one way towards Broadway. So from miles towards Broadway. So in these plans, we're looking at not only at speed lump locations, 2 on this section of Knight Street, but also contraflow bike lane all the way from Broadway to Swift Street, where the one-way condition ends. I'll also note that there's a, it's not called out on here, but at the intersection of Knight and Broadway, we're looking at some sort of element to really clearly identify that contraflow bike lane as being a contraflow bike lane. In addition, signage throughout is planned for safety purposes of people keeping an eye out that they should look both ways, that sort of thing. All right, so that was really the Federal Hill portion. Now sort of the south side. Ontario Street has some existing speed lumps. So these boxes that I have on the left here indicate existing speed lumps. In fact, these may not be speed lumps, they may be curb-to-curb speed bumps. These 2 stars, though, do indicate new speed lumps. So, yeah, that's all that we're looking at. For Ontario, it's 2 ways, so there's no planned contraflow bike lane, and the other features I mentioned that like signage and shadows. Again, Broad Street is planned soon for that 2-way urban trail. And apologies if you can hear my cats; they think it's dinner time, even though they already got dinner. Elmwood is also planned for eventual urban trail. That's longer term. So across Broad Street from Ontario here is Oxford Street. So this slide shows the beginning of Oxford Street. So here's Broad on the left. A couple blocks in, we're showing a couple speed lump locations here. So 1 in front of the church, 2 in between the church and Broad Street. So really quite a few there. And then another just past Prairie, close to Fogarty Elementary. And then continuing down the hill towards the water and Allens Ave, a couple other speed lump locations, 1 here by the Boys and Girls Club, and then 4 between Eddy and Allens to another side of the highway. So pretty simple, mostly speed lumps. Peace Street is somewhat nearby. So this shows Peace Street between Broad and Buckland, or really between Broad and Dexter here. So Peace Street has a couple one-way conditions. It's a little confusing. It's one-way between Broad and Updike, and then it's 2-way between Updike and Elmwood, and then it's 1-way again between Elmwood and Buckland. So in addition to a couple speed lump locations, 2 on either side of Elmwood, we are looking at contraflow bike lanes for those one-way areas. So St. Joe's Hospital, Peace and Plenty Park are some features here that orient you. Great. So continuing, so here's that that west portion of P Street here at Dexter. P Street becomes Waverly Street there. And a couple of these, I'll note, have been part of the Slow Streets program. And this is partly an evolution of the improvements as part of the Slow Streets program. So we saw that through that program that Waverly Street, which was included, had a need for more traffic calming, more permanent traffic calming. So we're looking at these speed limp locations as part of that. So 4 between Dexter and Cranston, it's a long block. The spacing suggests having 4 there. 1 at the park here near Kenwood, and then 1 on the other side of Union Ave near the service road over here near 610. So again, no contraflow bike lanes here, speed lumps and churros and signage. So moving along, Sackett Street in the lower part of the Elmwood neighborhood, again between Broad on the right here and Elmwood on the left here. So Sackett has a lot of existing speed lumps already, speed bumps. Really for most of this stretch, these rectangles again are existing speed bumps. Looking at this for Neighborhood Greenway, we thought there was a case for 1 additional speed lump location close to Elmwood. So for people who are coming off of Elmwood, trying to cut through to Broad Street, we want to slow them down before they really pick up speed over here, close to Elmwood. All right. So Vermont Avenue is in Washington Park. On the right side of your screen here is just the edge of Johnson and Wales's Harborside campus. On the left is Broad Street here. So Vermont goes between the 2 5 speed lump locations planned on Vermont. And again, this was part of the Slow Streets program. And again, this is sort of an evolution of that program. So 2 per block between Eddy and Narragansett Boulevard, which is right here. 1 down by Columbia Park. And then Vermont across Broad becomes Farragut Ave. And Farragut already has 2 speed bump locations. So no additional speed lumps planned for Farragut Ave, but some of those other features discussed earlier. And that gets you to Roger Williams Park over here on the left. All right, to Olneyville. So Aleppo Street runs between Riverside Park, which is at the left of your screen here, and Manton Ave past the side of Atlantic Mills. So there's a wonderful off-road shared use path that begins, that picks up here at the mouth of Riverside Park. And we have been working for a little while now on plans for an urban trail on Manton Avenue. The section on Aleppo, though, is very simple. We're just looking at speed lumps in these 2 locations. We're still working on Manton Ave. We didn't want to hold up this improvement to Aleppo with the more complex Lower Manton Ave project. Also in Olneyville, so really that last slide is just past the upper left corner of this one. So Manton Ave here on the left, we're looking at Delaine Street here, as well as Sonoma Court, which is the short dead end here. Valley Street on the right, here's Troop. Riff Raff are in the Mill Complex. Valley Street, Woonasquatucket River through the middle. So several speed lumps planned on Delaine Street. Delaine Street is currently a part of the on-road section of the Woonasquatucket River Greenway, and is a really important street through this neighborhood. And it's important for all modes, so that the speed lumps will really slow people down as they are driving along here and make it a more multimodal street for everybody. Sonoma Court is kind of hidden behind this other label here, and that's somewhat fitting because it's a very short street. It's a dead end that has Wilbury Theater Group on it, and at the end of it is the start of the Dunedin Park section of the Woonasquatucket Greenway. So there's a off-road shared use path just up here where my cursor is now at Wilbury Theater Group. So this short segment is going to have those sharrows on it, no speed lumps for that section. Just the sharrows to indicate this is part of the network. So Delaine is longer than this. Delaine continues past Valley. So this next slide is just that last block of Delaine, where we're planning one speed lump location. Delaine is also uses a cut through. This intersection near Troop of Delaine and Valley is a very busy intersection. These speed lumps will at least slow people down approaching that intersection on the Delaine side. So nothing planned on Harris. North of Delaine, we're looking at some future infrastructure on Harris. South of Delaine, nothing planned on Harris. Valley Street, well, nothing really planned on Valley Street at the moment either. I'll talk about that a little bit on one of these next ones. Okay, so this next one. So Valley Street has an existing speed lump at the other end of the Dunedin Park shared use path here, which is across from Amherst Street. So that speed lump has really been effective at slowing people down on Valley Street. And we want to get people between the Dunedin Park section of the Greenway, which you can just see the way part of that label up in the upper left here, over to the lower right of this map, where you can't really see here, the beginning of the Eagle Square portion of the Woonasquatucket Greenway. So the route that goes is Amherst Street and Tuxedo Ave for right now. There's some signage on there already, but we're looking at shared lane markings and some of that additional signage to enhance that, make it clearer. That's where you go. The Greenway. All right. And that's it. So those are the sections we're looking at. I see a hand raised, but let's see here. I need to open back up the participants window. Thank you all for joining us. Okay, so first, as I figure out what all is in the Q&A, I'm going to call on Doug, who has his hand up. Let me see if I can do that. All right, Doug, you are up. You were unmuted for a second. And trying again. Sometimes, oh.
That worked?
Yes. Are you there, Doug? What is your name and street?
My name is Doug Victor, and I live on Princeton Avenue at 103 Princeton, which is 2 streets south of Plenty Street. And excuse me, I have to say, really thrilled that Peace Street going into the west end to Waverly is part of this neighborhood Greenway project. A couple things that I would like to just bring to attention more is that the center block of Peace Street, which has Peace and Plenty Park and Peace and Plenty Community Garden, and also part of the St. Joseph's parking lot, a big part of the parking lot, is 2 ways. So we have 2 blocks, as well you're aware, that are 1 way and one that is 2 ways. So I just think it's necessary to have consideration for maybe turning that 2-way into a 1-way so that all 3 blocks, so we're not adding to pedestrian, bike user, and park users and traffic and driving confusion. I would like to also just mention that as well we know, Joe Pialino has donated parts of St. Joseph's Hospital there on Peace Street to the city to become a future school, and the mayor is dedicating I think $75 million to update and to prepare that, which I think is really terrific, and it's going to be it's a good use of that building for our neighborhood. However, I think with that coming, there's going to be a huge increase in car traffic on Peace Street. So I would like to call for a traffic study to be done that not only includes Peace Street, but Plenty Street, where there are no speed humps and there's tremendous speeding, Updike, Whitmarsh, Princeton, and more streets, the streets that are surrounding this new facility, that maybe there's a way that the streets can be reconfigured so that there is, so that we're not really looking at hugely increased traffic in our residential areas because of a new school. It's going to be a big school also that will be coming into our area. So those are my comments. And the other is I'd like to know how we can access the maps to share. I know you sent one map out, Alex, but that map that visually connects the urban trail with the city walk, with the neighborhood greenways, that really makes a big difference.
Yeah, so if I can, so first the map that, this presentation and this whole recording of the webinar, I should have mentioned that earlier, I apologize that this is being recorded. We tend to post to the city's website, and certainly, and again, I apologize for not mentioning this earlier, if you don't want your words to be posted on the city's website, let me know. You can do that in the Q&A, and I'll make sure to avoid that. But to use some of your other points, so again, this PowerPoint will be posted there, which has the maps in it. So Peace Street and St. Joseph's conversion to a school. I see that my colleague Nate Urso, who's the city's traffic engineer, is on. And Nate, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to acknowledge that you heard Doug's request.
Yeah, I heard part of it. I think when we do get into more detail about the school that might go there, I think I think a lot of the direction and design will have to do with how they operate. So I think as we get into plans, if there are going to be plans or just some discussions with the school, you know, a lot of times school drop off and pickup dictate a lot of the traffic control that's out there. And I think that might dictate what we might do. You know, for example, you know, how much space they need for drop off and pickup. That may dictate, that may warrant a, you know, a one-way or one-way during school time or something like that. So it's to be discussed, but I know you mentioned a number of ones in there, Doug, in terms of around that whole area for, was the sense that, I know you mentioned Peace Street. The other ones, was it traffic calming? I mean, if you want, we can maybe communicate offline, maybe outside of the scope of this project. I mean, we are, you know, we are doing some traffic calming on Peace Street. Mm-hmm. There are a couple locations that we're doing just between Buckland and Elmwood. You know, the rest of it is probably going to get done under the planning project here. So, but maybe we can communicate offline on anything else besides that, Doug.
Happy to chat with you, Nate. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. I want to get to a couple of the Q&A comments here. So let me start from the views about the order of these. So the first of these is from Daly, who I see also has their hand up. And this question says, why is there a speed bump on Waverly between Ellery Street and the service road? It's very short, and a car does not have the ability to pick up any speed there. It's not as wide as the rest of Waverly Street. So that's a great question. So there is a standard spacing for speed bumps, and what we look at is sort of the distance between end to end. So you saw that for that long block of Waverly, there were 4 speed bumps planned, and for this section on the western edge between Ellery and Service Road, like you say, there's 1 more planned. I live in that neighborhood. One thing I'll note is that people use the service road as a cut through sometimes, and there's also as part of the 610 connector project planned along that service road, sort of shared use side path separate from the roadway, which will have a lot of connectivity ultimately. So that'll be a significant corridor for people using these shared use paths to bike around or whatever. So I would anticipate that the traffic around that service road Waverly intersection of people on bikes is going to be a lot higher in the future. And with the 610 connector, we don't really know what the future condition of car traffic there is going to be. So I think, we're anticipating some of that increased demand for biking over there. And Daly, I want to get to some of the other, actually, let me just call on you now. That I'm going to try to unmute you, Daly. Unmute. This unmute button is sometimes, there we go. I think you're unmuted, Daly.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Did that answer your question?
So yeah, but can you tell me, like, why was Waverly chose? So I understand there's some plan to do something around the service road. However, this street or this end of the street where I live, it is very narrow. There's room for parking on maybe one side, and it's difficult for even 2 cars coming in opposite directions to get through. So I guess I'm just wondering why this end of Waverly was chosen. I understand the other end because it's a very wide street and there is speeding on that street. But in this section from Ellery to the service road, it's very quiet. And there's not a lot of traffic except for those that live on this end and those that are visiting. So I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, and thank you for your local knowledge, your experience of the street. So in addition to that, that expectation that I mentioned before, that with the 610 bike path that's going in along the service road, the expectation there'll be more people biking over there, biking and using the path for whatever. It's also about that connectivity piece that I mentioned before. So the neighborhood Greenway, going along the other part of Waverly and Peace Street, all the way from Broad Street over past Cranston to Union, and then in order to be able to get on that urban trail network, on those streets that are safe and comfortable for getting around without a car, we want people to be able to get between that new shared use path that's being built in the next couple of years and the rest of Union and Cranston and Elmwood and Broad, and the rest of the network over there. So it's really that connectivity piece to make sure that it's connected to the other facilities there. Does that feel like an okay answer to your question, Daly?
Alex, if I could jump in for a second. Hi, this is Martina Haggerty. I'm the Director of Special Projects. And I, again, second Alex's thank you for your local knowledge of living on the street and experiencing it. I think your point about potential traffic calming there at speed bumps maybe it's necessary in that section, and that's something that we'll take another look at for sure.
Okay, I would appreciate that. So I'm not sure how all of this, you know, what all of the connectivity looks like. But I think if you take a look at the section that I'm talking about, you probably, the next street over heading toward Westminster is a much wider street that still goes through to the service road. So you kind of might want to look at that in terms of, I just know that as narrow as the street is, I don't think anyone would use a bike to come up or down. It could be dangerous.
Well, thank you for that input. We'll look into it. Certainly want to make these streets not be dangerous. Thanks, Doug. All right. Bruce has a couple comments in the Q&A. River Ave, Elmhurst neighborhood. Oh, there's that's outside of what we've been talking about today, up in the northern part of the city. We'd love to see a project on Eaton Street, Smith Street, River Ave, etc. Yeah, so Smith Street is part of the Planned Urban Trail Network, and a few other streets in the neighborhood are as well. But again, that's not this this next batch of neighborhood greenways that we're looking at. But stay tuned, Bruce. I'm not sure exactly when the projects in the Elmhurst neighborhood are will happen, but not right now.
Alex, the other thing that might be worth pointing out is that the Great Streets Plan is sort of meant to be a plan that grows and evolves and changes over time. It's not meant to be set in concrete. And so as things change or demands change, you know, if we hear from a lot of folks that they want more things in the Elmhurst neighborhood, we want that plan to be very flexible, and we want to change and adapt it over time. And so just because there might not be something planned on River Avenue today in the plan doesn't mean that we can't work on that next year or the year after.
Yeah. Also, as a general note, not to go into too much detail, Alex, you know, Public Works is actually looking to put some traffic calming measures in place this fall. You know, we've done it a lot based on requests and kind of study them and do traffic counts, but there are a number of locations in Elmhurst. River Avenue is one of them. Without getting into detail, we've gone into them with both the council people there in Ward 5 and Ward 14, so they're very much aware of those. There's been some public meetings in Ward 14, so it may be worth reaching out to them to get an update. You can certainly reach out to me at Traffic Engineering with any specific questions.
Yeah. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Nate Urso, the traffic engineer who just spoke, manages the sort of the broader traffic calming process. So like I mentioned at the beginning, speed bumps are used not only in neighborhood greenways, but in other traffic calming situations throughout the city. So yeah, to both those comments, it's always good to talk to your council person if you want to see something in your neighborhood. They are very used to hearing traffic calming requests. And if there's other features of neighborhood greenways that you want to see, it's great to speak about those as well. All right. want to keep on getting through questions here. Thank you everyone who's put something into the Q&A. I'm just going in order here. So the next question is about what's planned for Manton Avenue. And so we had a public meeting in, I want to say it was March or late February maybe, about the plans we had for Manton at that time. It was pretty well received, but there were a few concise and clear requests. And one of the ideas that came out of there made it into those plans. So basically what we're looking at for Manton Avenue is just a short stretch of Manton Avenue from Aleppo Street to Sanssouci Drive, which is right by O'Neill Square. It's really a very short section on either side of Delaine Street. So it would connect the Aleppo neighborhood greenway I mentioned before to the Delaine one that I mentioned and the newly built Sanssouci bikeway. And at that meeting, I think we were showing a two-way trail on one side of the street that transitioned to the other side of the street at a kind of awkward place. And a really good idea that came out of that public meeting was to make that transition at Delaine Street. That's kind of in the weeds, but those plans have continued to integrate that feedback, and we're working on implementing those as soon as we can. I think we weren't able to get it done in 2020, which is, Mercy, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But these projects tonight that we're talking about are neighborhood greenways that are planned for 2020. So soon. I know some folks in the call really care about the Winnebago Greenway. So next from Nick. I'm not sure if someone answered this other question. Yes, it's like Martina answered in text Nick's question about when Broadway is getting paved. And the answer was, we'll check. We're still working on the design of Broadway, but TBD in terms of some of the final details. Okay. Oh, and the additional comment that Nick made and the follow-up was about plastic delineators. Yeah, the durability of various separation materials is something that we have been learning a lot about, think a lot about. So thank you for that comment. All right, just a couple more. If anyone else has any comments, now's a great time to put them in the Q&A. Questions or comments, now's a great time to put them in the Q&A, or raise your hand and I'll call on you in a second. So one other's, this is just affirmation. Love the contraflow bike lane on Lockwood and Night and improvements to Fricker. Great. So that is all of the questions and comments that came in the Q&A. If you have anything else, feel free to type it in there or raise your hand and we can call on you. I'm just gonna see if there's any other slides. Yes, so while you're doing that, for more information, the Great Streets plan has a page on the city's website. The address is on the screen now, and we will post this meeting, this presentation there. As I also mentioned, we'll post the recording of this meeting there. And that's my name and my email address. Feel free to email me if you have any other comments. It's just my first initial and last name at providenceri.gov, ALS@providenceri.gov. And we did just get another note in the Q&A from Eric saying, notice the Lockwood arrow is pointing the wrong way. It's a one-way towards Prairie. I don't know if it's showing the direction of the Greenway rather than the street. I think what you're talking about is the contraflow bike lane, Eric. So let me go back to that slide really quick. So first of all, there's different elements to this. Contraflow bike lanes on one-way streets, they're a way of providing two ways of traffic for people not going in cars. So cars would stay one way. So that's the contraflow bike lane. And yes, so Lockwood has the arrow going the opposite direction of the one-way traffic there. And that is adding that additional lane for that short segment so that people on scooters or bikes have a way to go both ways. The cars would still go the one way. Great. Okay. So if you have any other questions or comments, feel free to get in touch. We are happy to answer any questions and eager to hear any feedback you have, like Daly's feedback or Doug's feedback from their local knowledge. So thank you again for attending, and keep your eyes out. We're excited to get these out in the street, and yeah, looking forward to making these improvements. So thanks again for attending, and feel free to email me again, aellis@providenceri.gov, if you have any other comments. Thank you. All right, I think that's it. Bye, everyone.